Hello, my name is Sarah Anthony, and I proudly serve as state representative for Michigan's 68th House District, which includes the city of Lansing and Lansing Township. So, as you know, I have introduced many bills during my time here in the House of Representatives, but my very first bill was around child marriage. Now, I remember, it was one of my first days in office. I sat on the House floor and introduced a bill that would essentially ban child marriage in the state of Michigan. Now, most of the time I hear from people that say, wait a minute, child marriage? It's legal in our state? Well, in fact, it absolutely is. There have been a record number of child marriages, not just here in the state of Michigan, but across the country. And when I've heard the stories from so many young people, adults across not only the mid-Michigan region, but across the state, it continues to keep me up at night, knowing that across our state, there are young people, mostly young girls, who become child brides. So here today, I wanted to introduce Miss Courtney Kosnick. Now, Courtney is an amazing woman who has offered to share her story around child marriage. Because oftentimes we see statistics, we hear stories, we read them in the newspaper, but we wanted to put a face and a personal perspective on the issue of child marriage. Now, keep in mind, we have introduced this bill package 3 times along with colleagues on both sides of the aisle. But unfortunately, it has yet to see a hearing, any action here in the House of Representatives. So we encourage you to look up House Bill 4226, as well as its companion bills in the legislature. And we hope that there will be action taken before the end of the year. Because every day that we don't act, another young person is put in harm's way. So Courtney, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for just being willing to share your story.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for introducing these bills and making a move on this.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about not just your child marriage journey, but tell us a little bit about you.
A mother of 4 children. Those are first and foremost. The best thing in my life are the kids. I'm an accountant. I have 2 public accounting firms. I employ a staff of 7 to 8 women, and we help small businesses get through all the tax issues that come up. I have gotten in the last 6 years since I divorced, very involved on both the national and state level in wanting to end child marriage, having been someone who was a child bride and who stayed in that marriage, was trapped in that marriage for 23 years. The control it takes of your life and what it steals from young women is something that has to be stopped. So making sure that we work on this, whether it's on a national level or on the state level, is really important. And that's about it for me.
Outstanding. But I think the big title is Proud Mama.
Absolutely.
I love that.
I have raised 3 incredibly strong adult women now, and a son who will respect women, and he'll get there.
Yes.
He's only a junior in high school, so we've got a couple more years till he's an adult.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Now, tell us a little bit about your personal journey. So what age were you when you were married?
I said I do 2 days after I turned 17. We got my marriage license about 3 weeks before I turned 17. I was 16. My mother went with my future husband to the county building in Pontiac, because I lived in Oakland County at the time, and they signed my marriage license. I had grown up in a single family home, and I was, I don't want to say burden to my mother, but each child she had, it was the sooner she could get us off, the better. And she was convinced by this man I was going to marry that at his age, he was quite a bit older than I was, 12 years older, that he would be able to provide for me. And that's what she wanted, is for me to be provided for. Just didn't quite work that way.
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel as though you were emotionally, physically ready to be a wife, to be in a marriage.
Oh, goodness, no. I'm certain that at that moment, when I made these plans, when I said, yes, I want to get married, that I thought I was. But what you think at 16 and what turns out to be reality isn't the same. Very quickly after I got married, I realized I'd made a mistake. And I see that all around me, and things when I've looked back. My grades, I went from a straight A student to C's in high school because I had to finish my last year of high school being married and trying to balance a husband who was very abusive with schoolwork, with friends, and how do you juggle all that? It's hard enough as a high schooler to juggle your teachers and your friends, let alone adult relationships and how to provide in a family, how to do housework and all these things that I just had no comprehension of.
That's right. That's right. You know, we hear stories of girls as young as 13, 14, who are marrying much older men in their 30s, 40s, 50s. We've heard these stories even from county clerks across the state saying they have to stamp the marriage license. There's no provisions there. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, being in that type of relationship, being in a relationship that, you know, there's just such an age difference, and also being a minor? What was that like?
So from the very beginning, my husband had complete control. He had control over where I went, who I saw, who I talked to. He had control over where, if I worked or didn't work. There was no outside thought. I almost took that parent relationship that I would have had at home where I said, hey, can I stay out till 10? And they tell you yes or no, to a husband. I was now his charge. You cannot open a bank account under 18. Not a checking account. Savings account need your parents. So you couldn't have credit. You couldn't, there was nothing that I could do on my own. I couldn't, at that point, I don't know today, I've never looked, but I couldn't go sign a cell phone contract for my own phone. That just wasn't, there were no contracts that I could do. So the power dynamic was very clear very early on. I had none, he had it all. If I was going to be sick from school, he'd call in school and call me off for the day, otherwise I'd be truant. That's a weird way to live a life, as your husband has to call you off or sign your permission slip to go on a field trip because they insist you have to have a parent, even if under the state law they say you're an emancipated minor. No one looks at that. You're under 18.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, for so many things, we have a bright line, right? We say whether it's smoking, whether it's consuming alcohol, getting a driver's license, that we as a society have said, maybe it's 18 or 21 or 25, that there are ages that you have to be in order to do certain things, certain privileges. Why do you think there should be a bright line at maybe 18 for children to be married?
I'd almost say it should be much later, but we could stay with 18. Because the whole idea that once you're an emancipated minor, you have rights is not real. It's not really practiced. 18 is the minimum that someone should be. If you're a 17-year-old child wanting to get married, what is waiting a few months? What is waiting 11 months versus doing something that you could regret the rest of your life? It does not, there's no adverse harm in waiting a few months. And that's going to be true in any situation I've ever seen, is there's no reason to hurry this. I think that with a lot of child brides, you do see that hurry. So unlike friends of mine that I see today getting married and they spend a year planning a wedding, you're not doing that as a child bride. It is how fast can we get this done before someone stops it. And anything that you're going into a hurry in life, I've found usually is a mistake. So this is something that whether you're 16 or 17, you can wait until you're 18. And if we're allowing marriages prior to 16, we are sending these girls home with a rapist, because our state law has a line that's very firm that says age of consent 16. So any marriage that's consummated prior to that, it's going against that law. So why are we allowing children to be preyed upon.
That's right. That's right. And again, that's the thing that keeps many of us, including me, up at night, is we are creating a system that the power dynamic is just completely lopsided. Earlier when we were chatting, you said a quote that navigating like the world as an adult, but you're still a child, right? Yes. It's a very adult world that you're trying to maneuver with the mindset of a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old.
You don't have the experience to know how to do things. And you haven't had the life experience. And that's why I'd say 18 for me would be really young, but even at least then we'd have a minimum. And that person is seen as an adult in our society. It took 23 years to have enough power in myself to leave the resources. We're talking simple things like the ability to pay for an attorney. Took me 23 years to get. And that was with me running a company, supposedly making my own money, though I never had access to my own money until I divorced. So the length of time we've been able to prove that girls who are married off at a young age have a lower education. They don't typically go to college. Their incomes are lower. They're almost always left in poverty. So what occurs is even when you try to leave, it becomes financially impossible because you have no way out. And that's what you're stuck in.
What was the breaking point for you?
My ex-husband chose to start looking at his daughters in a way to farm them out to older men. And I was unwilling to see my children go down that same route. He had already cut off our oldest because she was too much like I was as a teenager, mouthy, and he wasn't able to manipulate her enough to control that. So she would say what she thought, and she really didn't care. And so she wasn't even allowed in our home at that point, which was very tough as a mom. I could see her outside of our home, but never around him, and I couldn't mention her. So when I noticed that he was starting to groom the younger two daughters, I decided I had to go. And I had to find a way out, no matter what, for them.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Let's go back to the legislation because, again, it's been very frustrating to hear story after story like this, and we can't even get a hearing for people like you, for, other child brides to share their story. If you had audience with a lawmaker from across the state right now, what would you say? So imagine us being in a hearing. What would you want the mostly men in power to know about your story?
Every adult in my life failed. I view the fact that I was allowed to marry as failure of the adults. Whether it's they wanted to keep, my mother wanted me to be happy, which is a great idea, but sometimes children don't know what makes them happy. You should not have been listening to a child. So from my mother to the clerk, to the minister who thought this was a great idea to marry me off, every adult I knew failed to step up and say to a child, this isn't what's good for you. You need to finish school. You need to see what your college options are. I mean, I had an amazing future laid out that quickly crumbled. And I guess I've spent enough time blaming myself, my own personal choice. I made the choice to get married. I wasn't in a forced marriage. But at some point, there should have been an adult who stopped and said, this isn't right, and we can wait. And had that happened, I feel fairly certain my life would have turned out very, very differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What would you tell young women children, I shouldn't even say young women, children in our state who maybe are in a similar situation as you, or in very different circumstances, but are facing the possibility of marrying a much older man?
So my answer would always be don't do it. Wait. Focus on you. The work that I did in myself through amazing therapists, through amazing friends, and just really looking at who was Courtney, who did I want to be as an adult. Do that now. Do that before you take the time, before you step into this relationship. Marriage should be a lifetime commitment. It should be something that is healthy and that is has both individuals growing and brings about a wholeness, and not one where you are at a lower rate, where you're less than. I spent 23 years being less than. Had I put the energy into me first, I am certain that I wouldn't have made those same choices. And even though situations may seem dire, whether it's a home life that is horrible or a pregnancy that wasn't intended, taking the time to put into you who you are, who you want to be, then deciding if marriage is the right choice. But take the time. You can never get the time back.
That's right. That's right. So one of the last questions I'll ask is, one of the big sticking points is this notion of exemptions. So instead of having what we would call a clean bill that just says nonstop, no child marriage in Michigan, period. There's been these notions around military exemptions, around, religious exemptions, or what if the minor is emancipated? Do you have any thoughts, just from someone who's lived through this? What are your thoughts on the exemptions that are being discussed here in the Capital area?
I started this 6 years ago thinking, well, if they were close in age, we could do it. Or if, she's 17, he's 18, he's going off to the military, we should do it. I've altered that so much in the past 6 years in realizing that there is no hurry to this. There is nothing that makes it to where if I don't do it right now, I can never do this. I can never get married. Yeah, you can. It might be 6 months. It might be a year. I think even in the case of pregnancy, at that point, you have a child, you can jointly raise this child. Paternity is amazingly easy to establish here in Michigan. You simply put the father's name on a birth certificate. And so you have rights to your child. So there's no push even in the case of a child in needing to do this. Let these children grow up. Let them become adults and decide for themselves. You mentioned other things that we have this firm line. We don't have exceptions for drinking. Oh, well, you're a mature teenager. We'll let you drink. Who judges that level of maturity? Who's judging it for a marriage license? We don't decide that just because one parent wants you to drink that we're going to. It's just, we have a law. We need that same law with marriage.
That's right. Courtney, I just wanted to thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for just being present and using this platform and your personal platform to try to end child marriage in Michigan. And I hope we see this across the finish line. I hope we can get this to the governor's desk. And I think that your powerful testimony is a critical piece to this. So just thank you for the opportunity to meet you and for sharing your journey.
Thank you. Thanks for introducing it.
Of course. Every day that we do not take action to end child marriage in Michigan, another child's life is destroyed. This is an archaic practice, and we have to act now in order to ensure that every young person within our state is protected. So we are calling on the chairs of these committees to prioritize the lives of our children. If you or someone you know has experienced child marriage, we ask you to lift up your story, to share your journey with us. Feel free to contact us by email, go to our website to learn more, or give us a call. We're here to listen, and we want you to know that today and every single day, we will be sharing your story and fighting to end child marriage in Michigan. Thank you for the time.